Emperor Zarthok stood before the massive viewing screen in his throne room, watching the final moments of the human colony on Kepler 442b. The orbital bombardment had been swift and merciless. Where once a thriving settlement of 50,000 humans had lived, now only smoldering craters and twisted metal remained. The death toll scrolled across his tactical display in cold blue numbers. The Vorthak Empire had conquered 12 galaxies over the past millennium. Zarthok himself had overseen the subjugation of over 300 species. Most had surrendered after witnessing the Empire's overwhelming military might. Others had fought brief feudal wars before accepting their place as subjects. The humans were different. These peculiar bipedal creatures had appeared on the galactic stage barely 2 centuries ago, spreading across star systems with remarkable speed. When the Vorthak Empire had first made contact, offering the standard terms of submission, the humans had done something unprecedented. They had laughed. Admiral Kextar approached the throne with measured steps, his forearms clasped behind his chitinous back. "Your Magnificence, the orbital strike has been completed. The colony has been eliminated as ordered." Zarthok's 6 eyes remained fixed on the devastation below. "How many human settlements have we destroyed now, Admiral?" "This marks the 47th colony, Your Magnificence. Our intelligence suggests approximately 200 human worlds remain." The Emperor's mandibles clicked in annoyance. For 3 years this war had dragged on. The humans possessed inferior technology, smaller fleets, and weaker bodies than most species the Empire had faced. Yet they refused to surrender. Every battle was fought to the last soldier. Every colony had to be reduced to ash. They showed no fear, no desire for self-preservation that other species displayed when faced with extinction. "The human children on this world?" Zarthok said quietly. "How many?" Admiral Kextar consulted his datapad. Preliminary scans indicated 5,731 juveniles among the population. "Your Magnificence." Zarthok nodded slowly. He had stopped counting adult human casualties long ago, but something about their young disturbed him. Human children were remarkably fragile compared to other species, yet their parents fought with even greater ferocity when protecting them. On 17 different worlds, he had witnessed human parents throw themselves into certain death rather than allow their offspring to be captured. A communication officer approached the throne. "Your Magnificence, we are receiving a transmission from the human government. It appears to be a response to your ultimatum. 3 days ago, Zarthok had transmitted his final offer to the human leadership on their capital world, Terra. Surrender unconditionally within 72 standard hours or face complete annihilation. Every previous species had capitulated when faced with such a deadline after witnessing the Empire's power. "Display the message," Zarthok commanded. The main screen shifted from the burning colony to show a simple text transmission. A single word appeared in the center of the screen in stark white letters against a black background. "No." The throne room fell silent. Admiral Kextar's auxiliary breathing holes fluttered nervously. The communication officers exchanged uncertain glances. In over 1,000 years of imperial expansion, no species had ever responded to the Emperor's final ultimatum with such brevity, such absolute defiance. Zarthok studied the word for long moments. He had expected lengthy diplomatic protests, desperate bargaining attempts, or emotional pleas for mercy. Instead, the humans had sent him a single word that somehow carried more weight than any speech their leaders could have given. "Has our translation matrix verified the meaning?" the Emperor asked. "Yes, Your Magnificence," replied the chief linguist. "The word translates exactly as displayed. It is an absolute negation, a refusal. No qualification, no conditions, no negotiation." The Emperor rose from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. At 4 meters tall and weighing nearly half a ton, Zarthok was imposing even by Vorthak standards. His species had evolved as apex predators on a world where strength meant survival. The empire he ruled commanded fleets that could shatter planets and armies, that had never known defeat. Yet this single word from a species barely 2 centuries old in the galactic community had managed to do something unprecedented. It had given him pause. "Admiral, what is the current status of our fleet?" "We maintain overwhelming superiority, Your Magnificence. Our forces outnumber the human fleet 8 to 1. Their largest vessels are roughly equivalent to our destroyer class. Intelligence suggests they lack our plasma cannon technology and quantum shielding." "Then why?" Zarthok asked, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Have we been fighting this war for 3 years? Admiral Kekstar's posture stiffened. The humans employ unconventional tactics, Your Magnificence. They utilize guerrilla warfare, suicide attacks, and defensive strategies we have not encountered before. They refuse to engage our main fleets in open battle, instead striking at supply lines and isolated squadrons. They fight like cowards? No, Your Magnificence. The Admiral paused, choosing his words carefully. They fight like prey animals that have learned to wound predators. Every victory costs us more ships than anticipated. Every conquered world requires permanent garrison forces, because human resistance groups emerge within months of occupation. Zarthok moved to the tactical display showing the current state of the war. Red dots marked human-controlled systems while blue indicated Vorthak territory. The pattern was unlike anything he had seen in previous conquests. Instead of a clear front line advancing steadily through human space, the map showed a complex web of contested systems, occupied worlds with active resistance, and supply routes under constant harassment. Show me the casualty reports, he commanded. The numbers appeared on screen. Vorthak military losses were higher than in the previous 5 conquests combined, not because the humans were stronger, but because they simply would not stop fighting. Captured human soldiers refused to provide intelligence even under extreme interrogation. Defeated human fleets would ram their damaged ships into Vorthak vessels rather than surrender. Occupied human worlds required constant military presence to prevent uprisings. Your Magnificence, the communication officer interrupted hesitantly. We are receiving additional transmissions from various human worlds. Display them. Dozens of messages began scrolling across secondary screens. Messages from human colonies, military outposts, civilian populations, and individual humans. Each message was identical to the first. No. The word appeared again and again, transmitted from across human space. A unified response that spoke of a species that had made its choice. Zarthok realized he was witnessing something that had never occurred in the Empire's long history of conquest. An entire species had looked extinction in the face and simply said no. Emperor Zarthok dismissed his court with a gesture, leaving only Admiral Kekstar and Chief Intelligence Officer Moxvan in the vast throne room. The silence stretched as the Emperor studied the continuing stream of human transmissions, each carrying the same defiant message. I want to understand these creatures, Zarthok said finally. Summon the xenopsychologist, and bring me detailed files on human culture, history, and biology. Admiral Kekstar shifted uncomfortably. Your Magnificence, with respect, is this the most efficient use of our time? We could simply deploy the planet killers and end this war within months. The Emperor's 6 eyes fixed on his Admiral with cold intensity. Admiral, in our 1,000 years of expansion, how many species have we been forced to completely exterminate? 7, Your Magnificence. All were either too primitive to understand our terms or possessed hive minds that could not conceptualize surrender. And how many species have ever responded to our final ultimatum with a single word of refusal? The Admiral's mandibles clicked nervously. None, Your Magnificence. Then perhaps, Zarthok said slowly, these humans warrant closer examination before we resort to genocide. Within hours, Dr. Veltara, the Empire's chief xenopsychologist, arrived with data pads containing humanity's complete psychological profile. The elderly Zephyrian had served the Empire for over 2 centuries, analyzing conquered species to determine the most effective methods of control. Your Magnificence, Dr. Veltara began, her melodious voice filling the chamber. Humans are indeed a fascinating anomaly. They are simultaneously one of the most cooperative and most destructive species we have encountered. Zarthok leaned forward on his throne. Explain. Humans evolved as pack hunters on a world filled with apex predators far larger and stronger than themselves. Their survival strategy was not individual strength but collective intelligence and unbreakable social bonds. They literally evolved to die for their group. The Emperor studied the biological data scrolling across his screen. Humans were indeed physically unremarkable. Average strength, moderate intelligence, short lifespans compared to most galactic species. Yet something had allowed them to spread across star systems with remarkable speed. Continue, Doctor. Humans have a unique psychological trait they call spite, Your Magnificence. When threatened with destruction, rather than seeking survival through submission, they often choose mutual destruction. They would literally rather die than lose their autonomy. Chief Intelligence Officer Moxvan stepped forward. Your Magnificence, our analysis of human military doctrine supports this assessment. They have a saying, give me liberty, or give me death. Their entire military philosophy is built around the concept of acceptable losses in service of principles. Zarthok reviewed the tactical reports with new understanding. The seemingly irrational human behavior suddenly made sense. Every suicide attack, every last stand, every refusal to surrender was not born from stupidity or ignorance, but from a fundamental aspect of human psychology. Show me their homeworld, the Emperor commanded. The main screen displayed Terra, a blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. The planet appeared remarkably peaceful for the homeworld of such a fierce species. Cities glowed softly across the night side, connected by transportation networks that suggested high cooperation and organization. Population? Zarthok asked. 12 billion humans, Your Magnificence, Moxvan replied. The highest population density of any species we have encountered. Yet their crime rates are surprisingly low, and their societies are remarkably stable. Dr. Veltara consulted her notes. Humans form what they call tribes, Your Magnificence. These can be based on geography, ideology, genetics, or shared experiences. While they often fight among themselves, they unite instantly when faced with external threats. Their response to our invasion has triggered what they call species unity. The Emperor absorbed this information in silence. He had never encountered a species that became more dangerous when threatened with extinction. Most species had strong survival instincts that could be manipulated. Humans seemed to have survival instincts that actively worked against individual preservation in favor of group survival. What do we know about their leadership structure? He asked. Highly decentralized, Your Magnificence, Admiral Kextar replied. They have over 200 sovereign nations on their homeworld alone, yet they maintain a unified response to our invasion through what they call the Human Defense Coalition. No single leader controls all human forces. This explained why targeting human leadership had proven ineffective. Unlike other species with hierarchical command structures, humans seemed capable of self-organizing resistance even when their official governments were destroyed. Show me recordings from the Battle of Proxima Station, Zarthok commanded. The screen displayed footage from one of the war's most significant engagements. A human space station, clearly outgunned and surrounded by Vorthak vessels, had been offered the chance to surrender. Instead, the station commander had transmitted a message declaring that they would make you pay for every inch of metal. What followed was 3 hours of the most ferocious defense the Emperor had ever witnessed. The humans had rigged their own station with explosives, turning every corridor into a death trap. When the station was finally captured, the Vorthak forces found that the humans had destroyed all valuable resources rather than allow them to be taken. The final act of defiance came when the station commander, mortally wounded and surrounded, had activated the station's reactor overload. The resulting explosion had destroyed the station and crippled 2 Vorthak battleships. Their tactical doctrine appears to be based on inflicting maximum damage regardless of their own survival, Admiral Kexter observed. Every engagement costs us more resources than anticipated because they fight with complete disregard for their own losses. Dr. Veltara nodded. This is consistent with their evolutionary psychology, Your Magnificence. Humans who sacrificed themselves for their group were more likely to ensure their relatives survived. Over millions of years, this created a species with an instinctive willingness to die for abstract concepts like freedom or honor. Zarthok studied a detailed analysis of human physiology. Despite their physical limitations, humans had one remarkable capability. They could function effectively even while experiencing extreme stress, pain, or trauma. Their bodies produced chemicals that allowed them to continue fighting long after other species would have collapsed. They are essentially a species of berserkers, he mused aloud. Not exactly. Your Magnificence, Dr. Veltara corrected gently. Berserkers fight without thought or strategy. Humans fight with calculated fury. They plan their defiance, organize their resistance, and coordinate their sacrifices. They are perhaps the only species that can be both utterly rational and completely self-destructive simultaneously. The Emperor rose and walked to the viewing screen showing Terra in real time. 12 billion humans lived on that world, each one apparently willing to die rather than submit to his empire. For the first time in his reign, Zarthok found himself facing a problem that could not be solved through superior firepower. What would happen if we destroyed their homeworld? He asked quietly. Based on our analysis, Moxvan replied, it would likely make the remaining human colonies even more determined to resist. Humans have strong emotional attachments to their homeworld. Its destruction might trigger what they call total war. Zarthok contemplated this. A species that became more dangerous when threatened, led by no single authority that could be negotiated with, willing to accept any level of casualties to maintain their independence. The simple word no suddenly carried the weight of an entire species' determination. For the first time in his long reign, Emperor Zarthok began to question whether this war could be won. Emperor Zarthok made an unprecedented decision. Instead of ordering the immediate destruction of human worlds, he commanded his intelligence forces to capture a human alive for direct interrogation. Not a soldier or government official, but an ordinary civilian who could explain the mysterious unity that drove their species. The operation took place on the agricultural world of New Haven, a recently established human colony with minimal defenses. Vorthak Special Forces infiltrated during the planet's night cycle and captured Dr. Sarah Chen, a xenobiologist studying local plant life. She was brought to the Emperor's flagship without being harmed, though her captors expected the usual response of terror or despair that characterized most prisoners. Instead, Dr. Chen had calmly asked for access to their ship's library. Now she sat in the Emperor's private meeting chamber, seemingly more interested in examining the alien architecture than worrying about her fate. Zarthok studied her with fascination. She was unremarkable by human standards, middle-aged, average height with graying hair and wearing simple work clothes. Yet she displayed no fear in the presence of the galaxy's most powerful ruler. Dr. Chen, the Emperor began, his voice translated through the universal communicator. Do you understand who I am? Emperor Zarthok of the Vorthak Empire, she replied without hesitation. Ruler of 12 galaxies, conqueror of 300 species, and currently engaged in an unsuccessful attempt to subjugate humanity. The casual way she described his empire as unsuccessful stung more than intended. You show remarkable composure for someone facing interrogation, Dr. Chen shrugged. You're going to ask me why we won't surrender, and I'm going to try to explain something you probably can't understand. After that, you'll either kill me or let me go. There's not much point in being afraid of outcomes I can't control. Zarthok leaned forward. This human's attitude was unlike anything he had encountered. Very well. Why won't your species surrender? Because we're human, she said simply. That is not an explanation. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, then asked, Your Majesty, may I ask you a question first? No prisoner had ever made such a request. Intrigued despite himself, Zarthok nodded. What drives your empire to conquer other species? The question seemed obvious. Superior strength grants the right to rule. The strong lead, the weak follow. This is the natural order of the universe. But why do you need to rule others? Your species could have remained on your homeworld and lived comfortable lives without ever conquering anyone. Zarthok considered this. The truth was that conquest had become such an integral part of Vorthak culture that questioning it seemed absurd. Conquest brings resources, territory, and security. We rule because we can. So your motivation is practical, Dr. Chen said. Survival, comfort, security. Those are all good reasons. But tell me, Your Majesty, what would happen if a more powerful species arrived tomorrow and demanded your empire's surrender? Would you submit? The question struck Zarthok like a physical blow. The idea of surrendering to a superior force was so alien to Vorthak's psychology that he had never considered it. We would fight to the last warrior, even knowing you would lose. Even then, Dr. Chen smiled. Then you understand humanity perfectly. The Emperor stared at her. But your species is not facing extinction by superior force. You are being offered the chance to live under our rule. With respect, Your Majesty, you're missing the point. It's not about whether we could survive under your rule. It's about whether survival without freedom is actually living. She stood and walked to the viewing screen showing the stars beyond. Humans have a concept called dignity. It's hard to translate, but it essentially means that some things are more important than physical survival. We would rather die as free beings than live as slaves. But you could have good lives under our rule. Many species have prospered as part of our empire. Prospered according to your definition, Dr. Chen corrected. Fed, housed, protected, and controlled. But Your Majesty, what makes life worth living isn't just having your physical needs met. It's having the right to make your own choices, even if they're bad choices. Zarthok felt confusion growing in his mind. You would choose to die rather than accept security and comfort? We would choose to die rather than accept that our choices don't matter. Every human child learns that freedom isn't something you can give to someone else. It's something each person must claim for themselves. The Emperor activated his data display, showing the statistics of human resistance. Your freedom has cost 5,831 children their lives on Kepler 442b alone. How do you justify those deaths? For the first time, Dr. Chen's composure wavered slightly. We don't justify them, Your Majesty. We mourn them. Every single life lost in this war is a tragedy. But those children died free, and their deaths ensure that other children will have the chance to live free. That is irrational. Living children are more valuable than dead ones regardless of their circumstances. Is it irrational? Dr. Chen asked. Your own species refuses to surrender to superior force. Are Vorthak warriors who die in hopeless battles being irrational? The comparison unsettled Zarthok. Vorthak culture celebrated warriors who died fighting impossible odds. Their greatest heroes were those who had chosen death over surrender. Yet somehow, when humans made the same choice, it seemed senseless. The difference, he said slowly, is that Vorthak warriors die fighting for victory. Your species is fighting for a principle. Yes, Dr. Chen agreed, and that principle is worth dying for. The Emperor studied this unremarkable human woman who spoke of death with such calm certainty. Explain this principle to me. Dr. Chen returned to her chair. Imagine, Your Majesty, that you could live forever, but only if you allowed someone else to make every decision for you. Where you lived, what you ate, what you thought, who you loved, you would be immortal but never free to choose your own path. Would you accept that bargain? The question created an uncomfortable sensation in Zarthok's mind. The idea of surrendering all personal agency was deeply disturbing, even in exchange for immortality. You see, Dr. Chen continued, humans believe that the ability to make choices, even wrong choices, is what makes us truly alive. When you demand our surrender, you're not just asking us to accept your rule, you're asking us to stop being human. But surely some humans disagree with this philosophy. Not all members of your species can share this same willingness to die for abstract ideals. Dr. Chen nodded. You're right. Not every human agrees on everything. We argue constantly about politics, religion, economics, and social issues. But when faced with the choice between freedom and slavery, we become remarkably unified. She gestured toward the viewing screen. Every human world that responded to your ultimatum with the word no made that choice independently. No central authority commanded it. 12 billion individuals on hundreds of worlds all came to the same conclusion simultaneously. The implications of this statement hit Zarthok with stunning force. An entire species scattered across vast distances had instinctively chosen the same response when faced with his ultimatum, not because they were commanded to, but because their fundamental nature left them no other choice. You are saying that surrender is literally impossible for your species? Not impossible, Your Majesty, but it would require us to become something other than human, and we've decided that being human is worth dying for. For the first time in his reign, Emperor Zarthok began to understand that he was not facing a military problem that could be solved with superior firepower. He was confronting something far more dangerous, an entire species that had discovered something they valued more than life itself. 3 days after receiving the human ultimatum response, Emperor Zarthok called for a private meeting with his oldest advisor, General Thexmore. The ancient Vorthak had served 3 emperors and witnessed the rise of the empire from a single world to its current galactic dominance. If anyone could provide perspective on the human situation, it would be him. They met in the emperor's private chambers, a stark room furnished only with ancient weapons and battle trophies from conquered worlds. Thexmore's scarred carapace showed the marks of countless battles, and his movements carried the weight of centuries. You seem troubled. Your magnificence, the old general observed as he settled into a chair designed for his massive frame. These humans puzzle me, Thexmore. In all your years of service, have you encountered anything like them? The general was quiet for a long moment, his ancient eyes studying the emperor's face. Perhaps it is time to tell you something that previous emperors chose to keep classified. Zarthok's attention sharpened. What are you talking about? The humans are not the first species to respond this way to our ultimatums, Dexmore said carefully. There have been others, 7 others to be precise. The Emperor felt a chill run through his body. The 7 species we were forced to exterminate completely? Yes, Your Magnificence. The official records state they were too primitive or possessed hive minds, but that was not the truth. Each of those species gave us the same response the humans have given. Each chose extinction over submission. Zarthok rose abruptly, pacing to the window overlooking his capital city. Why was this kept from me? Because knowledge of those failures might have made you hesitant to expand the empire, Your Magnificence. Your predecessors believed it was better to frame complete extermination as dealing with primitive species rather than admit that some civilizations simply could not be conquered. The Emperor processed this revelation. 7 entire species had been wiped from existence because they refused to bow to Vorthak rule. The Empire's record of conquest was not as perfect as he had been led to believe. Tell me about them, he commanded. General Thexmore activated a holographic display, showing star charts from centuries past. The Carathians were the first, a proud warrior culture that viewed death in battle as the highest honor. When we offered them terms of surrender, their response was to declare a holy war against us. It took 40 years to hunt down their last survivors. The next image showed a crystalline species. The Vextal were next. Silicon-based life forms with collective memory storage. They chose to destroy their own memory crystals rather than allow us to access their knowledge. An entire civilization's history was lost because they preferred oblivion to conquest. One by one, Thexmore displayed the extinct species. Each had possessed some unique characteristic that made them unable or unwilling to accept subjugation. The ethereal minds had been energy beings who simply dissipated rather than submit. The stone builders had triggered massive volcanic eruptions on their worlds, choosing to die in molten rock rather than live under Vorthak rule. But the most similar to humans, Thexmore said, his voice growing heavy, were the Azurians. The hologram showed blue-skinned bipedal creatures remarkably similar to humans in size and structure. They were explorers and philosophers scattered across hundreds of worlds. Like humans, they had no central government but maintained unity through shared ideals. Zarthok studied the image intently. What happened to them? They fought us for over a century, Your Magnificence. Every world had to be conquered individually. They developed increasingly desperate tactics, including weapons that would sterilize entire planets rather than allow us to claim them. In the end, we were forced to destroy their homeworld and hunt down every last colony. How many Azurians were there? At the start of the war? Nearly 50 billion spread across their territories. By the end, 0. The Emperor sat heavily in his chair. 50 billion lives extinguished because they would not submit. The weight of that genocide had been hidden from him, presented instead as a minor footnote in imperial history. Why are you telling me this now? Zarthok asked. Because the human war is following the exact same pattern as the Azurian conflict. The same desperate resistance, the same willingness to accept massive casualties, the same refusal to negotiate. And our generals are starting to recommend the same solution. As if summoned by their conversation, Admiral Kekstar requested an urgent audience. The Emperor granted permission, and the Admiral entered carrying tactical reports. Your Magnificence, the Military Council has completed its analysis of the human situation. We recommend immediate deployment of planet-killer weapons against their major population centers, beginning with their homeworld Terra. General Thexmore gave the Emperor a meaningful look. Here was the same recommendation that had been made regarding the Azurians. On what grounds, Admiral? Zarthok asked. The humans cannot be conquered through conventional means, Your Magnificence. Every occupied world requires permanent garrison forces. Their resistance networks continue to operate even in controlled territories. The economic cost of maintaining this occupation is becoming unsustainable. The Admiral activated his own holographic display showing the current state of the war. Furthermore, human tactics are evolving. They have begun developing new weapons specifically designed to counter our technological advantages. Intelligence suggests they are working on some form of biological warfare that could target Vorthak physiology. Zarthok studied the reports with growing unease. The humans had indeed proven remarkably adaptable. When their conventional weapons proved ineffective, they had developed new strategies. When their fleets were outgunned, they had turned to guerrilla warfare. When their colonies were occupied, they had formed underground resistance movements. What is the estimated timeline for complete human extermination using planet killers? He asked. Approximately 18 months, Your Magnificence, assuming they do not develop effective countermeasures. And if they do develop countermeasures, Admiral Kekstar hesitated, then the war could continue indefinitely, Your Magnificence. Human industrial capacity is growing, not shrinking. Despite our attacks, they seem to thrive under pressure. After the Admiral left, General Thexmore spoke quietly. The Azurians also developed new technologies during their war with us. Desperation breeds innovation, especially among intelligent species fighting for survival. Zarthok stared at the tactical displays long into the night. The parallels between the human conflict and the hidden Azurian war were unmistakable. Both species possess the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat, the same willingness to sacrifice everything for their independence. But there was something different about the humans. The other extinct species had fought with desperation born of fear. The humans fought with something else entirely. Their simple response of no had not been delivered in panic or desperation. It had been calm, measured, absolute. Thexmore, the Emperor said finally, what if we are approaching this incorrectly? Your Magnificence? Every species we have conquered has been motivated by survival. They surrender because they want to live. The 7 extinct species chose death because they could not live under our rule. But what if the humans are different? What if they are not motivated by survival or death, but by something else entirely? The old general considered this. What else could motivate an entire species to such unified resistance? Zarthok looked again at the human homeworld displayed on his screen. 12 billion lives, each one choosing the same path of defiance. What if they are fighting not for their lives, but for something they consider more important than life itself? The question hung in the air between them, unanswered but profound in its implications. For the first time, the Emperor began to wonder if the humans possessed something the Vorthak Empire, for all its power and conquest, had never truly understood. Emperor Zarthok spent 3 days in private contemplation after his conversation with Dr. Sarah Chen. The human scientist had been returned to her world unharmed, a gesture that had confused his military advisors. But the Emperor needed time to process what he had learned about humanity's fundamental nature, the revelation that humans valued freedom more than survival had created, a crisis in his understanding of conquest itself. For the first time in his reign, Zarthok found himself questioning not just military tactics, but the very foundations of his empire. General Thexmore found him in the Imperial Archives, surrounded by historical records of the 7 extinct species. The Emperor had been reading for hours, searching for patterns he had missed before. Your Magnificence, the old general said carefully. The military council grows impatient. They request permission to begin the final solution against the humans. Zarthok looked up from the ancient files. Thexmore, I have been reviewing the records of the Azurian extinction. Tell me, what happened to the Vorthak forces that participated in that campaign? The question seemed to puzzle the general. They performed their duties with honor, Your Magnificence. Why do you ask? I want you to interview the surviving veterans of that war. Specifically, I want to know about their psychological state following the complete destruction of the Azurian species. General Thexmore's expression darkened. This was not a topic commonly discussed in military circles. Your Magnificence, if I may ask, why is this relevant to our current situation? Humor me, old friend. The interviews were conducted over the next 48 hours. General Thexmore returned with a datapad full of disturbing testimonies. Veterans of the Azurian extinction campaign had experienced unprecedented rates of psychological trauma. Many had requested transfers to non-combat positions. Some had resigned from military service entirely. The pattern is consistent across all 7 extinction campaigns, Thexmore reported grimly. Warriors who participated in the complete destruction of sapient species suffered long-term psychological damage. Many never recovered. Zarthok absorbed this information with growing unease. What was different about these campaigns compared to conventional conquest? The interviews suggest that conventional conquest involves defeating enemies who eventually surrender. The warriors could respect their opponents while accepting their submission. But the extinct species fought until there were literally none left alive. Our soldiers were not defeating enemies. They were committing genocide. The Emperor studied casualty reports from the human war with new understanding. Vorthak morale was indeed declining, but not due to military defeats. His soldiers were experiencing the psychological toll of fighting an enemy that would not surrender, forcing them into increasingly brutal actions. There is something else. Your Magnificence, Thexmore continued. The veterans report that fighting the extinct species changed how they viewed conquest in general. Many began questioning whether forcing submission from other species was honorable. This was perhaps the most disturbing revelation yet. The act of completely destroying a species that refused to surrender had undermined the moral foundations of conquest for those who participated. Zarthok realized he was facing not just a military problem, but a potential crisis of imperial legitimacy. Admiral Kextar requested an urgent meeting to discuss new intelligence from human space. The Emperor granted the audience, though he suspected what he would hear. Your Magnificence, human military capabilities continue to evolve at an alarming rate. They have developed new ship designs specifically optimized for hit-and-run tactics against our fleets. More concerning, they appear to be sharing technology and resources at an unprecedented level. The Admiral activated tactical displays showing human fleet movements. Previously, human colonies operated with significant independence. Now they are functioning as a unified military force. The war has accelerated their technological and social development. Zarthok studied the data with a sinking feeling. The humans were not weakening under pressure. They were becoming stronger. The threat of extinction was forging them into something more dangerous than they had been before the war began. Furthermore, Admiral Kextar continued, our intelligence suggests that humans are developing weapons designed specifically to counter our advantages. They are studying captured Vorthak equipment and developing countermeasures at a remarkable pace. What kind of countermeasures? Biological agents that target Vorthak physiology, quantum disruptors that can disable our shields, and kinetic weapons that can penetrate our armor. Most concerning, they are developing these technologies in secret across multiple worlds simultaneously. The Emperor realized that the humans had turned their species' greatest weakness into their greatest strength. Their decentralized nature meant that destroying some of their research facilities would not stop their technological development. Each world was independently working on solutions to the Vorthak threat. There is one more thing, Your Magnificence, the Admiral said reluctantly. We have intercepted communications suggesting that humans are attempting to contact other species within our empire. This was the nightmare scenario Zarthok had hoped to avoid. What kind of contact? They appear to be sharing information about our military capabilities and tactics. Intelligence suggests they are trying to inspire resistance movements among our subject species. The implications were staggering. If humans succeeded in sparking widespread rebellion throughout the Empire, the entire structure of Vorthak dominance could collapse. The Emperor's 1,000-year empire could be brought down not by superior force, but by the spread of human ideas about freedom and resistance. Your recommendation, Admiral? Immediate deployment of planet-killer weapons against all major human worlds, beginning with Terra. We must end this war before their influence spreads further. After the Admiral departed, Zarthok found himself alone with an impossible choice. He could order the complete extermination of humanity, adding another species to the list of civilizations erased from existence. This would preserve his empire, but at the cost of committing genocide against a species whose only crime was refusing to surrender. Alternatively, he could continue the conventional war, accepting that it might drag on for decades or even centuries, but this path risked the psychological destruction of his own forces and the potential spread of human resistance ideology throughout his empire. There was a third option, one so unprecedented that it challenged everything the Vorthak Empire represented. He could do something no emperor had ever done. He could withdraw from a conquest. The thought was almost physically painful. Retreat would signal weakness to the entire galaxy. It would encourage other species to resist Vorthak rule. It might even inspire rebellion among species that had already been conquered. Yet as Zarthok reviewed the data from his conversation with Dr. Chen, he realized that the humans had revealed something profound about the nature of conquest itself. They had shown that some things could not be taken by force, that true victory required the consent of the conquered. For the first time in Vorthak history, an emperor faced an enemy that could not be defeated without becoming something monstrous in the process. The humans had presented him with a mirror, forcing him to confront what his empire truly was. A machine that turned free beings into subjects through the application of overwhelming force. The single word, no, had accomplished something that no military defeat could have achieved. It had forced the galaxy's greatest conqueror to question the very nature of conquest itself. As he stared at the tactical displays showing human space, Emperor Zarthok realized that regardless of what decision he made, the Vorthak Empire would never be the same. The humans had changed everything simply by refusing to change themselves. 1 year after the Great Withdrawal, Emperor Zarthok stood in his private observatory watching a sight that would have been unimaginable during the height of the war. A human diplomatic vessel was approaching his flagship, carrying ambassadors for the first formal peace negotiations between their species. The year had been tumultuous for the Vorthak Empire. The withdrawal from human space had indeed triggered uprisings among several subject species, just as his advisors had predicted. 3 entire star systems had declared independence, citing humanity's successful resistance as inspiration for their own liberation movements. Yet something unexpected had also occurred. The species that chose to remain within the empire had done so with renewed loyalty, no longer viewing Vorthak rule as an inevitable oppression, but as a partnership they could influence and even leave if necessary. The fear-based compliance had been replaced by something far more stable, genuine cooperation. General Thexmore entered the observatory with the latest reports. Your Magnificence, the human delegation has docked. Ambassador Martinez requests an audience at your convenience. Zarthok nodded. Any word from the rebellious systems? The Kethvar delegation has agreed to negotiations regarding autonomous status within the Empire. The Zeranian Republic is still deciding whether to seek complete independence or some form of alliance. Only the Drakmarian Confederacy remains hostile. The Emperor studied these reports with satisfaction. Rather than the complete collapse his military advisors had predicted, the Empire was restructuring itself into something more sustainable. Species were choosing their level of association rather than having it imposed upon them. There is other news, Your Magnificence, Thexmore continued. Our economic analysts report that voluntary cooperation is actually more profitable than forced subjugation. Species that choose to remain allied are contributing more resources and innovation than they did under occupation. This discovery had been perhaps the most surprising outcome of the human crisis. Freed from the need to maintain massive occupation forces, the Empire could redirect resources toward trade and development. Species that felt they had a voice in their own governance proved to be far more productive partners. The human delegation arrived in the throne room precisely on schedule. Ambassador Elena Martinez was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She was accompanied by Dr. Sarah Chen, the xenobiologist who had helped the Emperor understand humanity's fundamental nature. Your Imperial Majesty, Ambassador Martinez said with a respectful bow that acknowledged his status without suggesting submission. I bring greetings from the Human Defense Coalition and an offer of formal diplomatic relations, Zarthok studied. The 2 women who represented a species that had fundamentally changed his empire through the simple act of refusing to surrender. Ambassador Martinez, Dr. Chen, you are welcome aboard my vessel. The negotiations that followed were unlike any in Vorthak history. Instead of dictating terms to a conquered species, the Emperor found himself engaged in actual diplomacy with beings who treated him as an equal, rather than a superior force. The Human Coalition proposes a non-aggression pact, Ambassador Martinez began, with provisions for trade agreements and mutual assistance against external threats. Dr. Chen added, We're particularly interested in sharing scientific research. Human studies of your empire's technology during the war revealed several areas where our different approaches to problem-solving could be mutually beneficial. This was perhaps the most ironic aspect of the situation. The humans' desperate attempts to develop countermeasures against Vorthak technology had led to innovations that could benefit both species. War had inadvertently fostered the kind of rapid technological development that usually required decades of peaceful research. What assurances can you provide? Zarthok asked. That human ideology will not continue to inspire rebellion within our empire? Ambassador Martinez smiled. Your Majesty, we can't control what ideas inspire others, but we can point out that your decision to allow voluntary association within your empire has already addressed most of the conditions that make rebellion attractive. Dr. Chen nodded in agreement. Humans rebelled because we were offered no choice. Species that have choices rarely feel the need to fight for them. The Emperor considered this wisdom. The human crisis had taught him that sustainable rule required the consent of the governed, a concept that had been alien to Vorthak thinking. "There is one question I must ask," Zarthok said. "During our war, 5,031 human children died on Kepler 442b alone. Thousands more perished on other worlds. How do your people view the empire that caused those deaths?" The throne room fell silent. This was the question that haunted any possibility of lasting peace between their species. Ambassador Martinez was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Your Majesty, we mourn every life lost in that war, but we also recognize that you faced an impossible situation. We gave you a choice between genocide and withdrawal, and you chose withdrawal. That decision defined your character more than the preceding war defined it." Dr. Chen added, "Human culture has a concept called redemption. We believe that beings can grow beyond their past actions through wisdom and better choices. Your empire's transformation suggests that growth is possible even on a galactic scale." The Emperor felt something he had never experienced before. Relief mixed with a strange emotion that Dr. Chen might have called hope. The humans were offering not just peace, but the possibility of a future where the Vorthak Empire could be something other than a conquering force. "What do humans envision for the future of galactic civilization?" he asked. "A community of species," Ambassador Martinez replied, "each contributing their unique strengths while maintaining their independence. Humans excel at adaptation and innovation. Vorthaks excel at organization and long-term planning. Other species have their own gifts." "You speak of diversity as strength rather than weakness," Zarthok observed. "Because it is," Dr. Chen said. "Our war with your empire proved that diverse approaches to the same problem yield better solutions than uniform thinking. Human guerrilla tactics succeeded precisely because they were unlike conventional Vorthak strategies." The treaty negotiations continued for 3 days, producing an agreement that would have been unthinkable at the war's beginning. The Vorthak Empire and human coalition would maintain separate sovereign territories, while cooperating on trade, research, and mutual defense against external threats. More importantly, they would work together to establish what Ambassador Martinez called the Galactic Cooperation Council, a forum where all species could participate as equals in shaping interstellar policy. The human delegation prepared to depart. Dr. Chen approached the Emperor privately. "Your Majesty, may I ask what convinced you to withdraw from human space? What made you choose a path no emperor had ever taken?" Zarthok considered the question carefully. "Dr. Chen, your species taught me that some victories are not worth winning. More importantly, you showed me that true strength sometimes means choosing not to use the power you possess. And what will you tell future generations about the war with humanity?" The Emperor looked out at the stars, where human and Vorthak ships now traveled the same trade routes in peace. "I will tell them that we encountered a species that valued freedom more than life itself, and in trying to conquer them, we discovered something more valuable than conquest." "What was that, Your Majesty?" "The possibility of becoming worthy of respect, rather than simply commanding fear." As the human vessel departed, Emperor Zarthok reflected on the transformation his empire had undergone. The simple word "no" had done more than end a war. It had begun an evolution that would reshape galactic civilization. In attempting to conquer humanity, the Vorthak Empire had instead conquered something far more valuable: the wisdom to know when not to fight, the strength to change what needed changing, and the courage to build something better than what had come before. The humans had given them the greatest gift any species could offer another: the opportunity to become better than what they were. And perhaps, Zarthok thought as he watched the human ship disappear among the stars, that was worth more than any conquest could ever have been. Emperor Zarthok called an emergency session of the Imperial War Council. The massive chamber filled with the Empire's highest-ranking military officers, intelligence chiefs, and planetary governors. Many had traveled from distant galaxies to attend what they assumed would be the final planning session for humanity's destruction. The Emperor entered without ceremony, his massive form casting long shadows across the assembled officials. The usual ritual greetings were abbreviated. Everyone could sense the gravity of the moment. Members of the council, Zarthok began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I have reviewed all reports regarding the human situation. Before we proceed, I want to hear your final recommendations. Admiral Kextar stood first. Your Magnificence, the military's position remains unchanged. Immediate deployment of planet-killer weapons against all major human population centers. The threat they pose to Imperial stability grows with each passing day. General Mordak, commander of the Fifth Fleet, rose next. I concur with the Admiral. My forces have been fighting humans for 3 years. They cannot be conquered through conventional means. Extermination is the only viable option. One by one, the military commanders voiced their support for the final solution. The pattern was clear. Every officer who had direct experience fighting humans recommended their complete destruction. Governor Vexillar of the Outer Rim Territories spoke last. Your Magnificence, I must respectfully disagree with my military colleagues. The cost of this war has already strained our resources. Furthermore, complete extermination of a sapient species will have psychological effects on our own forces that we may not fully understand. The chamber erupted in debate. Military officials argued for swift action while civilian administrators worried about the broader implications. Zarthok listened in silence, noting how even his own council was divided on the human question. Enough, the Emperor commanded, and the chamber fell silent instantly. I have made my decision. Every being in the room leaned forward expectantly. This moment would define the future of the Empire and determine the fate of 12 billion human lives. Admiral Kextar, Zarthok said slowly, prepare orders for immediate withdrawal of all Vorthak forces from human space. The silence that followed was deafening. Admiral Kextar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. Your Magnificence, did you say? Withdrawal? I did. All Vorthak military assets are to be pulled back to our previous borders. All occupied human worlds are to be evacuated within 30 standard days. General Mordak rose abruptly. Your Magnificence, this is unprecedented. No emperor has ever withdrawn from a conquest. The implications for imperial prestige are considerable, Zarthok finished, which is precisely why this decision required careful thought. The Emperor activated the main display, showing the current state of the war. Red zones marked human-controlled space, while blue indicated Vorthak territory. For 3 years we have attempted to conquer a species that refuses to be conquered. We have discovered that some victories come at too high a cost. Admiral Kextar's confusion was evident. Your Magnificence, we have overwhelming military superiority. We could exterminate the humans within months. Yes, Admiral, we could commit genocide, but consider the consequences. Our own forces are already showing signs of psychological trauma from fighting an enemy that will not surrender. Complete extermination would require our warriors to slaughter billions of civilians, including children. The Emperor paused, studying the faces around him. More importantly, the humans have begun sharing their resistance ideology with other species in our empire. If we destroy them through genocide, we risk turning them into martyrs that inspire galaxy-wide rebellion. Governor Vexillar nodded slowly. The humans have already demonstrated that their ideas can spread rapidly. Their concept of freedom appears to be highly contagious among sapient species. Precisely, Zarthok confirmed. We are not just fighting human fleets. We are fighting human ideas. And ideas cannot be destroyed with plasma cannons. General Thexmore, who had remained silent throughout the debate, finally spoke. Your Magnificence, what message does withdrawal send to the rest of the galaxy? Will other species not see this as weakness? The Emperor turned to face his oldest advisor. Perhaps, Thexmore. Or perhaps they will see something else entirely. Perhaps they will see an empire wise enough to recognize when conquest is impossible. The room buzzed with nervous conversation. The concept of impossible conquest was alien to Vorthak thinking. They had never encountered a problem that could not be solved with sufficient application of force. Consider this, Zarthok continued. The humans have taught us something valuable about the nature of rule. True authority cannot be imposed. It must be earned. For 1,000 years we have ruled through fear and overwhelming power. But fear-based rule requires constant vigilance and increasing brutality to maintain. Admiral Kextar's frustration was mounting. Your Magnificence, our empire spans 12 galaxies. Surely you are not suggesting we abandon conquest entirely. I am suggesting we evolve, Admiral. The humans have shown us that some species value freedom more than life itself. When we encounter such species, we have 3 options: genocide, endless war, or finding a different approach entirely. The Emperor walked to the viewing screen showing Terra in real time. I have decided that the Vorthak Empire will not become a machine for exterminating species that refuse to submit. The humans may keep their freedom. Governor Sector from the inner colonies raised a concern. Your Magnificence, what of our subject species? Will they not interpret this as permission to rebel? Some might, Zarthok acknowledged, which is why we must begin transitioning from an empire based on conquest to one based on mutual cooperation. Species that choose to remain part of our alliance will be welcomed as partners rather than subjects. The implications of this statement sent shockwaves through the chamber. The Emperor was proposing to fundamentally restructure the entire basis of Vorthak civilization. Admiral Kextar made one final attempt to dissuade him. Your Magnificence, this decision could destroy everything our empire has built over the past millennium. Yes, Admiral, it could. But the alternative is to become something monstrous. The humans have forced us to confront a fundamental truth. An empire that can only maintain control through genocide is an empire that deserves to fall. The Emperor returned to his throne, his decision final. The withdrawal orders will be transmitted within the hour. All military assets are to be pulled back from human space immediately. Any commander who delays or sabotages this withdrawal will face court-martial. As the council members filed out, in stunned silence, General Thexmore approached the throne. Your Magnificence, are you certain about this course of action? Zarthok looked at his oldest friend and advisor. Thexmore, in all our years of conquest, have we ever encountered an enemy that made us question the very nature of what we do? No, Your Magnificence. The humans have given us something more valuable than another conquered territory. They have given us the opportunity to become better than what we are. The old general considered this. And if other species see this as weakness and rebel, then we will face that challenge as it comes. But we will face it as an empire that chose wisdom over genocide, growth over stagnation. As General Thexmore departed, Emperor Zarthok remained alone on his throne, contemplating the magnitude of his decision. In choosing to withdraw from human space, he was not just ending a war, he was beginning the transformation of an empire. The humans' simple word no had accomplished what no military force had ever achieved. It had forced the galaxy's greatest conqueror to discover that true strength sometimes meant knowing when not to fight.